This is everything you need to know about Unit 1 for the AP test in AP World History Modern. Got a Unit 1 test coming up? Taking the AP exam in May? This video is going to cover all of the major civilizations, all of the major themes, and all of the major comparisons you need to know. There is also a resource guide linked down in the description. Go grab that real quick before we get started. Let's get to it. Unit 1 takes us from 1200 to 1450 CE and introduces us to 6 of the regions of the world. Today, we want to be able to answer the questions posed at the beginning of the series in our Unit 1 introduction video, which is, where is the civilization located? How did the society operate? What made it distinct? How was political power maintained? Let's start with China. Chinese society was culturally dictated by Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. Culturally, the idea of filial piety in Confucianism dictated a respect and deference to one's elders, and particularly emphasis towards men. China's government was a large centralized bureaucracy. The way to get a job and serve in the government was by passing the civil service exam. And the core subject matter of the exam was your knowledge of Confucianism. China maintained its power regionally by exerting political and cultural influence over those neighboring societies. Often, China would require other civilizations to provide them regular tribute in order to maintain positive diplomatic relationships. Additionally, China's civil service exam and religious influences would often become more common in these civilizations. Japan is a bit of an exception, though, to this rule, as the water that separated them proved to be a barrier for cultural diffusion. There were advantages for trading with China, as it had a great deal of commercial power. They produced luxury goods, such as silk and porcelain, that were highly sought after, and built infrastructure, such as the Grand Canal, that allowed for faster transportation and trade throughout China. China is also famous for some of the world's most important inventions during this period, such as the compass, paper, and gunpowder, all of which will play a role in future topics in the class. In East Asia, we saw how a powerful centralized state like China could influence entire regions through bureaucracy, culture, and trade. But not every region maintained power through a single dominant empire. In the Islamic world, we're about to see what happens when a large unified state breaks apart, yet still manages to stay connected in a different way. In 1.2, we saw that the world of daralislam is largely focused in the Middle East. Daralislam translates to everywhere Islam is and was largely governed by Sharia law, the Islamic legal system derived from the Quran. So as the cultural influence of Islam spread, so did its political power and vice versa. During the early events of Unit 1, the political formation of the Islamic world centered around the Abbasid Caliphate collapsed. The Islamic world was politically fragmented into different states, including the Seljuks in Iran, the Mamluks in Egypt, and the Delhi Sultanate in northern India. All of these empires were culturally connected in the region by their shared faith in Islam. The Islamic world during this period was also responsible for advancements in several different disciplines. Many of these innovations can be associated with the House of Wisdom in Baghdad in modern-day Iraq. A place of study and scholarship, this became a beacon of the intellectual efforts of Islam. Some of these innovations included preserving the works of European culture, such as Greek philosophy, as well as advancements in math, medicine, astronomy, and literature. In our first two videos in this unit, we saw two contrasting forms of political power. In the Song Dynasty, we saw a regional power influencing other civilizations. But in the Abbasid Caliphate, we saw a regional state structure collapsing into smaller empires. So in Daralislam, even though political power was fragmented, a shared religious identity kept the region culturally unified. Now let's take that idea of cultural and religious diffusion and watch it move even further. Because in South and Southeast Asia, trade networks are going to carry these belief systems across entire oceans. We can break down the concepts in this topic by looking at which religions spread where and what governments established power around the region. In the years before Unit 1 began, Islam was predominantly in the Middle East and North Africa, but it was also popular in East Africa on what we call the Swahili coast. Muslim merchants established trade communities on the coast of the Indian Ocean, and as they traded with merchants and ports, Islamic culture and ideas spread through those interactions across the region. Another effort that contributed to the spread of Islam was the work of Sufi missionaries, who were successful in converting low-caste Hindus that were dissatisfied with the caste system as Islam spread into India with the Delhi Sultanate. A huge continuity in world history is how consistent Hinduism's presence is in India, even into the present day. But Hinduism also spread on maritime trade routes into Southeast Asia. As evidence of this, Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument on earth, is a temple for Hinduism located in Cambodia. Buddhism, though, it began in South Asia, just like Hinduism, but became more common outside of India through trade on the Silk Road to civilizations in East Asia, such as China and then Korea and Japan, and also spread on trade routes into Southeast Asia. We largely focused on two civilizations in this region, the Vijayanagara in modern-day India and the Srivijaya Empire in Southeast Asia. Looking at how states in this region maintained power, the Vijayanagara was an empire in the southern part of modern-day India that maintained a centralized bureaucracy, had a tax system, and facilitated trade in the region. One of the most important parts of their power was how they portrayed themselves as champions of Hinduism, which gave them cultural validity and helped stabilize their control over the region. The Srivijaya Empire in Southeast Asia maintained a tremendous amount of regional power, as merchants in the Indian Ocean would sail there to access valuable commodities like spices and other trade goods. They maintained a strong navy and taxation system as part of their bureaucratic government, and their leaders used Buddhist ideology and monasteries to reinforce their prestige. In South and Southeast Asia, trade and religion worked together to spread ideas and reinforce political authority across connected regions. But what happens when societies don't have those same large-scale trade networks connecting them to the rest of the world? In the Americas, we're going to see civilizations develop their own unique strategies for maintaining power, completely independently from the rest of Afro-Eurasia. Topic 1.4 takes place in the Americas, where we focused on comparing and contrasting the Aztecs and the Inca. The Aztecs spread out to have regional control based primarily in modern-day central Mexico. The government structure that was there was technically a theocracy based on their faith. The government's focus in part was to ensure human sacrifices were available for rituals that were used to give energy to their deities. So human blood was required as payment through a tribute system established over people whom they conquered. This tribute system required conquered people to provide them with resources or people to sacrifice. Aztec rulers left the conquered people alone as long as they paid tribute. The Aztecs were seemingly the opposite from their neighbors to the south in the Andes Mountains of South America, the Inca. Without the ability to grow crops on flat ground, the Inca used two unique forms of agriculture in the mountains. One was terrace farming, where they built small plateaus in the style of a staircase up the sides of mountains and planted crops on the flattened steppes. Along with terrace farming, the Inca also built a system called waru-waru, raised fields that helped manage the flow of water in the mountains and prevent crop failure. The Inca were well organized under their emperor into a complex, large political organization. The emperor of the Inca was also believed by the people to be the descendant of their sun god, and thus his authority helped unify the empire. While they did conquer and expand just like the Aztecs, instead of mostly leaving those conquered people alone, they were forced to assimilate politically and culturally and acknowledge their gods and emperor. The Inca did not require conquered people to pay tribute, but they were required to work for the state in the Mita system. Citizens would mine, farm, or build projects for the government instead of paying financial taxation. Now let's shift back into the Eastern Hemisphere for a minute, where trade once again becomes a major factor. In 1.5, we looked across sub-Saharan Africa. West Africa was influenced by the trade opportunities they provided in gold and salt that brought Islam and merchants across the Sahara Desert. Ethiopia's historical trade with the Roman Empire brought Christianity to their civilization. Zimbabwe served as the middleman for goods in the interior of sub-Saharan Africa, trading goods to Swahili city-states, who then sold them through the Indian Ocean trade route. Across sub-Saharan Africa, we saw how trade and religion worked together to build powerful and connected societies. But not every region in this period is defined by growth and expansion. In Europe, we're about to see what happens when a powerful empire collapses, and societies have to rebuild political power from the ground up. And understanding Europe in Unit 1 really starts actually with the Roman Empire. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 CE, Europe fragmented. The eastern part of the Roman world continued as the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines viewed themselves as the continuation of Rome, maintained a central government, and practiced Eastern Orthodox Christianity, especially after the Great Schism. Western Europe, on the other hand, entered a much more decentralized period. The stability of the Roman system was gone and political power shifted into smaller kingdoms. In this era, cultural growth slowed, cities and trade routes became less safe, and much of the peasant population focused on survival. Many people moved into the countryside looking for protection, work, and stability. Feudalism provided the social and political structure of Western Europe. Kings, nobles, vassals, knights, and serfs all fit somewhere within this hierarchy. Lords owned the land, Vassals managed that land in exchange for loyalty or military service. Knights provided protection and military service. But the peasant population found safety on manors by becoming serfs. As serfs, they provided labor for the manor lord, and in return, they received protection and a level of security. The manorial system organized daily life. Manors became almost entirely self-sufficient because people could not always rely on unsafe trade routes. And these estates, these manors, provided housing, tools, farmland, protection, and often a local Catholic church where people gathered and worshiped. And that brings us to the other major source of authority in Western Europe, the Catholic Church. The lives of hardworking serfs, the church became the most important unifying institution in Western European society. So while Western Europe lacked centralized political authority, it still kind of had a centralized cultural authority through Christianity. During the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks conquered land from the Byzantines, which led the Byzantines to request military aid from Western Europe. This launched the Crusades. Manor lords called upon their vassals and knights to join, and over time, crusading became a major part of European life. Over the subsequent centuries, multiple crusades were launched. And while there were religious wars, these interactions between Europe and the Middle East also increased trade and facilitated the transfer of ideas and technology. Now that we are caught up on the who's who of Unit 1 civilizations, let's think big picture about how they accomplished the major task of Unit 1, maintaining political power. Take a look at this chart of all the civilizations we studied. We've got centralized bureaucracies, strong, unified authority with formal administration or imperial control, decentralized states, which were fragmented political authority, and then city-states, independent urban centers or small localities that are politically autonomous. It's not a competition, but if it was, centralized bureaucracies absolutely dominated this period. Turns out paperwork and tax collection are incredibly effective tools for maintaining empires. Okay, here's something else. Take a look at this spiced tea visual showing the official College Board learning objectives for Unit 1. Notice which color themes appear over and over and over again. Politics in orange and culture in green. Again and again, Unit 1 asks us to explain how civilization used governments, religions, and shared cultural systems to justify and maintain authority. That's the core argument of the entire unit. But remember, Unit 1 is only half the story for Period 1. Unit 2 is where these regions become increasingly connected through trade networks, cultural exchange, and technological diffusion. More on that in other videos. Check out these other resources I made available for you in the description below. And then maybe watch some of my other videos from Unit 1. Have a great day.